Documentaries are about the people that you meet and the stories you can tell. Stories of tragedy, laughter, hope and desperation, across faraway lands or right here in your own backyard. This podcast brings these stories to you, the listener, so that you can experience the adventures of documentary filmmaking in audio form while embarking on daily adventures of your own. Welcome to Barefoot Media's Stories Within Stories podcast with your host, Simon-Holland. Well, what can I say about Mark Huxley, one of my favourite people on the planet? Mark is a childhood friend, creative collaborator, and above all, a truly independent filmmaker. Mark shot his first feature film in ultimate guerrilla style for around about 5,000 Australian dollars, which is next to nothing. After just finishing film school, I ran into Mark at a voting booth and discovered that he was editing on a cardboard box with an old school television, literally with a glass screen, on Adobe Elements. I couldn't believe that he was making a film this way. And after art school, I was led to believe that you needed all the fancy tools and tons of people to make a film happen. But here was this guy sitting there making something that he wanted to make on absolutely zero resources. In addition to filmmaking, Mark is a musician, an actor, and all-round cool cat that has actually built an entire VHS store in his house as part of his current web series, Home Video. In this episode, we talk about getting films with no resources, no YouTube tutorials, and no rules. Today on the show, we have Mark Huxley, probably one of my most favoritist creative minds of all time. Mark, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on the show, Simon.
You have always been in my mind when I think of what creativity is, like wrapped up as a person, you're that person. If I ever went, I want an out there idea for like a project or something, I'll go talk to you. And then we just get like in this weird back and forth where the idea just gets crazier and better and crazier and better. And then that's kind of what you roll with in the end.
Yeah, nice.
Do you feel like you're a creative person, or how do you, like, what's it feel like in your head getting around?
Yeah, man, I've always tried to be creative, I guess, from a young age, making short films and, used my dad's handheld camera, VHS tape camera, just going about shooting things. And I guess it all snowballed from there and, gradually got into, like I said, short films, stop motion animations and things. And I guess the creativity just flowed from that. It's just, it's a weird one because it's something you do have to work at, but at the same time, you shouldn't really push it,
Because there's sitting around creativity where you're sitting on the couch or you're doing the dishes or something and you're thinking tons of ideas, you're thinking through ideas and stuff. But then there's productivity meets creativity, and that's when you're getting stuff done. And I think you sort of operated because of your creative and because of the passion and drive that just is inherently in you. You're always creating. Like when we sort of started talking about film projects and stuff as adults, I didn't think you'd even heard of Screen West funding. Like,
no.
Like, why would I get funding when I can just go and make stuff,
No, not early on, no. I just grab the camera, start rolling. It's like when I made Wrong Night Stand, which is my first feature film debut. I think we ran into each other down at the polling booth.
It was the K-Rod elections.
Yeah. And I started telling you about the film and you said to me, "Oh, who's your DOP?" And I'm like, who's your what? And you're like, "You're the director of photography." I'm like, me.
But the funny thing is that it never occurred to you that there's more people involved.
Yeah, and I've always been that type to, run around do the lights, do this, make the set, get real hands-on. And tell you the truth, a lot of directors initially started working like that, big directors like David Lynch and things like that, because they just didn't know, Orson Welles and stuff. And it's not until somebody tells them, "Look, that's not your department." You should really focus just on the directing, sit in your chair and do your directing. But I like to get my hands dirty, in there and really get hands on with it. So. And
it makes so much sense because a film really is a combination of a whole bunch of disciplines. And so if you have to set up your own lighting, then all of a sudden you're thinking about what's in shadow, what's in highlight, where's my key, where's my fill? That's the technical side of it. But what is the emotion? So you're thinking, you're doing a gaffer job thinking of it as a director. And I think that's really important, especially when you get on bigger sets and you've got to communicate to different departments. If you've had to do it and think about it and think why it contributes to story, you're like so much better off.
Yeah, definitely. Like starting off, it's the best way to learn is to just get in there and try and learn everything because, I mean, when you've got no budget, you really have to just do what you can to get the job done.
Mm.
You know, if I had, a couple $100,000 or $1 million to make the movie, then sure, I'd, hand off the other bits and pieces to other people, but I don't have that. So you got to work multiple roles.
What's the first job? If you can only hire one person for your next film, what's the first hire? You can only spend money on one person. Who's the first person?
It'd be cinematographer.
You'd get rid of that job.
What do you mean?
Like you'd hire someone in so you didn't have to do it.
Yeah, because then I could focus more on the directing.
Yeah.
A lot of times if you're looking through the camera, then you're focused on the lighting and you're trying to focus, is this right? And then you might forget the actual actor's performance.
Yeah.
But if you've got somebody just operating the camera, you know that they're taking care of that, you can really focus on the performance, which at the end of the day is what is going to make the movie great.
Yeah. I think when you started starting as a videographer or a one-man band and then going into documentary, you make all the mistakes because of being stuck in those two worlds. Like you need to think, you're thinking of edit, you're thinking of story, and you're thinking about, stuff like that as a director. And then you're trying to check your ISOs, and there's so many, or your microphone or some shit there's so much going on technically that you either keep the conversation going in the mood or you switch and look at your equipment and make sure that's going good.
Yeah.
And then you fuck stuff up because it's two different brains, almost.
Yeah. And once again, with Wrong Night Stand, the boom mic and the microphone we were using, a lot of the time,
when Watto, remember Watto at the warehouse? He was so drunk.
Yeah, he was a friend that was willing to help out, and it was great. It was great that he did, but probably about 60-70% of the sound I couldn't use because it was either turned off. He wasn't aware that the battery had gone flat. He wasn't hanging it close enough to the actors.
Yeah,
and so we had to do a lot of audio overdubs.
He'd never done film anything in his life. He's this drunk friend we had. It's hold this shit. Just come hang out and drink as much as you want, and then you've got to hold the boom steady over a shot. And
then that caused.
He's already a bit shaky by default as a human. So he's gonna.
But then in turn to 3 or 4 months of audio overdubs, getting the actors in to record their lines and that. And so, if I could pay somebody to do the sound, then great, I would.
Yeah, sound.
But I can't do the film, the photography plus the sound at the same time.
Yeah. I think sound is the first thing I'd spend money on, just because, you need great sound, number one. So that should be a person just looking at the sound as 100% their job and doesn't Venn diagram with anything else on set. And you can do everything else, but if you fuck sound, good luck. You can't get that back. You can't.
Yeah, and it is 50% of what you're seeing 50% and you're hearing 50%.
So how did you cut it, not having 70% of your on-set sound in One Night Stand? How'd you cut around that? What did you do?
Well, basically, majority of the dialogue was overdubs.
Yeah.
And I took what I could of the ambience, and then I went about trying to recreate, went back out and recorded the ambience and just had basically tried to get around it like that.
I'm going to tell this story. You had an actor who'd, after the fact, because you didn't know about forms, you didn't anything like that. You had an actor after the fact come to you and said, I demand 5% of the back end or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And what'd you say? Tell us the story.
Or, I won't mention names.
No, don't tell the story.
Him and one of the other actors they didn't like each other. And
not even your problem.
No. And in one of the scenes, one of the actors is basically calling him a fat bastard.
No, but it was in context on set. There's a fight scene. He's beating him to death on the ground.
Yeah.
Right? No spoiler alert there. But he's beating him to death and he's going, fuck you, blah, 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 blah. And he's you fat bastard. And the actor just said it out loud.
And then in
context, in character, while getting filmed.
Yeah.
And then it played on his mind.
He didn't want to be perceived on screen as that because he already had some issues about being fat himself.
Yeah.
And then basically came to me and asked, look, well, I want 5% of the takings. Otherwise you can't use my footage in there.
Yeah.
I said, look,
because I think I look fat on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, well, look, you agreed to this, and then basically said, well, you can't use it because, there was a producer involved, and then my brother, he had taken part of the credits as well. And I said, if this keeps, I said, then there was an actress. I said, if this keeps going, I'm going to be left with nothing. And I'm doing like, 80, 90% of the work here.
Yeah.
And I said, you're really only a bit part as well. So it's like, why would I give you 5% if like these people that are doing a lot more than you, they're not getting anything.
Yeah.
So like just on principle, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, well, then you cut. So I had to spend another couple of months going about, reshooting and try and work it where he wasn't in it.
It didn't look like many reshoots either.
No, it was a handful of scenes.
Yeah. But like you cut this dude completely out of the movie. Like I watched one take with him in it. And actually I think he was like probably the key figure in that warehouse scene, right? Like for conversation. And he did a really good performance and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then the next time I watched the movie, this guy's not in it completely and I didn't notice. So I'm like, mate, that is some fucking next level editing, hey?
Well, that was the thing. It was a good performance. But, I just thought, well, just on principle of the matter, I can't do it,
And also getting held over a barrel because as an editor, as a filmmaker, from start to finish filmmaker, like that's the most vulnerable you are is when you've shot everything and now you're in edit. Like that's when everyone else has the most leverage if you haven't crossed your T's and dotted your I's at the start.
Yeah.
With forms and this is the understandings and stuff. But he changed the deal.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe you cut him out of it. Like that isn't, I would have been trying to cut deals like, come on, this, that, what can we do? Because like, fuck, how am I going to get him out of the story? But somehow you just played and then he was gone. Like the story still worked.
At the end of the day, it worked out for the best because his role was a side story.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought, well, he's a major part of the side story. Let's just get rid of that side story and focus on the main film.
What were some lessons you learned from Wrong Night Stands, from start to finish? And can I say like this is how, so at the K-Road elections, we go back to our home because none of us had changed our voting addresses or whatever. So we go back to bibra-lake and we chat at the thing. And then you're like, yeah, come and have a look at my editing. I'm just doing this at the moment, how I'm doing it. I go to your house. It's like an old school CRT television perched on a cardboard box and a keyboard. And you're editing on the television about 10 centimeters away from it, like a glass screen, wasn't it? Like, what's cool? And I was like, dude, I'm coming from like Murdoch. I've just graduated Murdoch. So we're using like cutting edge tools and stuff like that. I go there, I'm like, you're doing a film on this? Like,
well, I just put it down to
on Adobe Elements too, 99.
Not even Premiere, Elements. I just put it down to plain ignorance.
Yeah, sure.
I was like, well, I'm going to make a film. No one's going to get in my way.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I mean when you're my creative touchstone. I always, because you go the proper way. A lot of barriers get in the way. You need people, you need good camera equipment. Too much is about lighting, so you don't skimp there. And then all of a sudden you've got a budget that you can't raise to make the film that you need to make.
Yeah.
So whenever I get down that rabbit hole and stress out, I'm like, fuck, this is never going to happen because of this. And you didn't get this round of funding. So, then I come back to you and I go, Mark, give a fuck. Like you literally started under $99 or something.
Yeah.
But you made the whole film for how much?
It was about between 5 and 10 grand all up.
Mm.
And, it's on Tubi, it's on Amazon. It's been doing really, really well on Tubi actually, and it's in Germany and Italy on different,
Yeah.
So it's actually doing really well. But that was the interesting thing, like even when coming across, when you came on board with it, because I was shooting on, I think it was the Canon 550D, this really crappy 18-25mm lens.
Plastic lens, yeah.
And, then the night scenes were just horrendous. Like it couldn't capture the darkness. It was just so crap. And then you came aboard and just you made the night scenes look like wonderful. And I was like, oh man, savior.
Yeah, because there was no fucking around. Like we had, the only reason I had a 5D, which had a full frame sensor at the time, was game changer. And there was a dentist that I knew not far from me, who was a stills photographer. But he bought this amazing tool, but he just never used it. And it was kind of like, hey, do you mind if I use this? And he's like, yeah, whatever you want, come over and borrow it. And so I just went and borrowed it for those shoots and we shot it. But all we had was like a 5D and a 50mm 1.2 lens. That was it. We shot the whole thing on basically a 50mm, and then I think you upgraded to a 60D at some point with the flip screen. And then, that was it. But once we sorted out what lenses you were doing, what I was doing, like cutting the coverage was pretty good. Hey, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even having John Bailey there doing the lighting, he was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, lighting. So that helped. So that was part of the budget, was the lighting, and then just paying for like the nightclub use.